Is there actually one big name left to monitor for the Bucks, and who is that? Plus, Damian Lillard opens up about his Milwaukee exit. Camille and I share the details coming up next on today's Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. You can find me during the season on the Bucks Radio Network. You can catch Camille on the Locked On NBA show and the Technical Foul podcast as well. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Bit of a grab bag of things that have popped up in the last day or so for today's episode, Camille. But the place to start, I suppose, comes to us from Damian Lillard. And I know there's been a little bit of Dame fatigue that we've definitely seen in the comments. But he had a couple of interviews recently, his introductory press conference in Portland where he talked through things. And then an interview as well that just dropped, this morning with the Journal Sentinel, where he shed some more light on the exit in Milwaukee. And I was operating under the assumption there was a bit of, I suppose, a tip-off that Dame wasn't completely blindsided by this, and this is something that the organization approached him with leading into that July 1st date. I think that was even reported somewhere. Coming directly from Damian Lillard's mouth, apparently that was not the case.
Yeah, he mentioned, going out to dinner, with some Bucks brass and being told and reassured that, the organization will be supporting him throughout his rehab process. And then he was at the gym, a couple of days later, heard a knock and got the word of, you're being waived and stretched. And he said it was a shock. It was a shock to him, but like he understands it's, it's business. It's the cold side of the business, but it is the business. And, he gave the Bucks a lot of credit too on the way out, calling a top line organization, feeling like connected with people at the organization too. So like he acknowledged like, hey, it was a little cold, but like I understood the why behind it. And yeah, kind of put finally to rest did he know? Did he not know? What was the situation behind it that we've been hearing kind of back and forth over the last few weeks since the news really broke?
Yeah, it was, as Dame said, dinner with John Horst and Milt Newton, the Bucks assistant general manager in Portland, where the meeting was basically a catch-up, and they reassured him how the organization would support him through his rehab. And as he was preparing for a session at the gym, he heard a knock on his door, and it was his assistant telling him he needed to call his agent immediately, and said, I grabbed my phone to call him, and I saw it on my phone. My screen was on Instagram, and when I grabbed my phone to call him, my screen unlocked, and the thing at the top of my timeline was a double-sided image with me and Myles Turner, and under my name it said waived, under his name it said signed, and he had a Bucks logo. And I thought, Myles Turner to the Bucks? I had to be waived for him to be signed, and that's how I saw it. It was definitely a shocker. So, yeah, it goes against, I think, what some of us assumed, and even as I mentioned, was initially softly reported out there. But what you said too about this wasn't Dame blasting the organization. He said top-notch organization, world-class organization, and still had high marks of praise for everyone that he worked with. And, on the side of the Bucks, the more you think about it, the more you can understand of you can't really tell him, because that comes out, hey, Damian Lillard was just told by the Bucks they plan to waive and stretch him. They're going to have some cap space. They're going to be a cap space team. What are they going to do with that? And then that puts other teams on guard a little bit. And again, I think that was really the big part of the Myles Turner signing was you caught Indiana flat-footed, where they were maybe prepared for what if Brooklyn gets frisky here and kicks the tires on it. Maybe not the greatest fit. Maybe Detroit does something. But to see, wow, the Bucks are maybe the most ideal fit in a basketball perspective for Myles Turner, and now they have the space to do it. That's what created this and caught them off guard and landed Myles Turner in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I mean, and we've also heard the Bucks up operating like under that cloak of secrecy, like to bring Damon in the first place, where
Yeah.
that was part of the conversation as well of Drew Holiday and him feeling kind of blindsided about this trade after he talked about, hey, I want to be a Buck for life, and he signs his contract and everything is good. And then boom, he's traded for Damian Lillard. And there was a lot of conversation then around the way that happened, if the feelings that real life people had about being traded, all the conversation went into that. So hearing the Dame side of things too, finally kind of clearing the air about it. To your point, it's the cold side of business for sure, because to your point, like you don't want other teams to know how you're operating. And we understood how the Bucks felt internally about their operations from the article we saw with Eric at The Athletic, where John Horst made mention of the fact, like, besides a couple teams here in the East, we felt like we had a lot of flexibility this summer. So it's to hear it phrased that way of like, we felt like we had flexibility knowing what was on their books. And the only way to really get there is to try to get Damian Lillard off of your books. Like, it's a different, it's interesting thinking about how front offices have to navigate. And again, people are always saying like, this business is business, and it is. So I love that Dame can separate that and be like, I mean, I get it. Injuries were tough on us, and that was a big part of the Milwaukee run. But at the other side of it, like, yeah, it was still kind of cold though for it to happen that way. So I always say like multiple things can be true at the same time. And it's like you can acknowledge, like, hey, we learned now he did not know super ahead of time. He was getting told one thing, different thing happened, but also that the front office had to operate in the way that they had to operate because they wanted to make sure they didn't show their hand and didn't tip anybody else off.
Yeah, and I think the place to wrap it, and at least for now, barring something earth-shattering that comes out in this offseason, Damian Lillard opens up and trashes the Bucks, something like that. I think we can close the book on the Damian Lillard conversation now, but I'll just close it with this. And I believe he said this at his introductory press conference with the Blazers, talking, and he tiptoed around some of these things too towards the end with the Bucks, but talking about the situation in Milwaukee. It's just basketball. It doesn't feel incomplete to me. It just feels like it's basketball. You got to be lucky to win big. You got to be healthy, and you got to be playing your best at the right time. And we just had bad luck during that run in Milwaukee there. And that's how I think every Bucks fan is going to view it. The excitement that started late September 2023 and the thoughts of this team's back, championships, Dame and Giannis paired together, to seeing it not unfold that way. And just from really day one, it just felt like they were never really on the same track and couldn't really get there for a number of reasons. And Dame, I think, sums it up best. It was just bad luck. Mm-hmm. And that's how you view this 2-year stretch of Bucks basketball. What we hope is not bad luck is Myles Turner and his fit with the Bucks. So there's a couple of interesting numbers to throw out there in this pairing between Myles Turner and Giannis. The free agency wheel kind of slowed down to a halt now, but there's still some interesting names out there, and one that won't go away when it comes to others linking it to the Bucks. We'll share that coming up after this. If you've ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family, it can be a challenge. It might be game day and suddenly you realize you want to be in the stands. A couple of weeks ago, you might have been that person. You wanted to get to Milwaukee for the Jacob Mizorowski experience. Well, that's where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merchandise, even an invite to a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, at the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time's the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game This weekend, the Brewers back in town. And, of course, early next week, you got the Chicago Cubs here at American Family Field. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So the Myles Turner fit, again, something we've talked through quite a bit, but just looking at, and this is something for more of a future show, but thinking about the most talented guys that Giannis has played with in his career, I don't know that Myles Turner would immediately pop to the top of the list. And granted, we haven't seen it yet for a lot of Bucks fans, but what stands out is obviously the floor spacing ability. And we've, talked quite a bit about Myles Turner, being basically Brook Lopez, but 8 years younger, and in some ways a better version of Brook Lopez, specifically the shooting. And that's the big part to me, is what we have not talked about quite a bit is just the volume. Myles Turner took 5.5 threes per game last year, which was a career high for him. He made more than 2 of those. So he shot 40% if we round up. He's a career 36% three-point shooter. And when you look at the volume of attempts and that percentage, there are only 2 big men in the league that achieved those numbers: Myles Turner and Kristaps Porzingis, who is oddly enough another one of those names that you like, well, I don't know. Is there a way you could get Kristaps Porzingis and he could be the guy to put next to Giannis? Could you buy low on him? And you can see why with those numbers. We mentioned 5.5 threes per game for Myles, attempts, that is. Bucks haven't had a big take that many threes since Brook Lopez in his first year averaged 6.3, and he made the same volume per game as Myles Turner did a year ago. So you can see the comps there, but I think, obviously the fit is what you're looking for. There's going to be a much higher volume, which is going to be music to the ears of a lot of Bucks fans, of 3-point attempts from your big than there was a year ago.
And it needs to be. The Bucks as a team, as a whole, just need to shoot more threes. And I know I've tuned in a few times to Bucks Talk after games, listening to you talk to some fans who are calling in. And there can be complaints from time to time from Bucks fans from last season that the Bucks took too many threes last season, which is something that I would not agree with, given the fact that the Bucks were able to knock them down at such a high volume as a team. Like, I want to see them put up more threes, especially in this offense that's being ran by Giannis at point guard. Like, you want him to be able to spray out and for guys to knock down threes. To have Myles Turner there, who can do this, as you mentioned, at a level that we haven't seen since Brook's first year in Milwaukee, it's going to be nice to have. And even looking at how Myles Turner gets most of his threes, the shot diet is very similar to Brook, where it's not many corner threes coming out of this. Like, that's not the area of the floor that you generally see them, but you can get a lot of above the break threes. And with Myles Turner being a big there, you can get those threes with him being a trailer. Like we saw Brook get quite a few opportunities from that. He can also be a killer in pick and pop situations. He's good in situations where your ball handler can touch the paint, kick it back out to him because he can knock the catch and shoot down. Like, it is a luxury to have a big that can stretch the floor in that way. And again, we've talked about why it's so important to have that type of big next to Giannis, and especially with Giannis having the ball in his hand more often. So I'm kind of curious too what like the pick and pop, pick and roll situations look like between Giannis and Myles Turner, if they operate with any of those going forward in this upcoming season. So definitely want to see more threes from the Bucks as a whole, and Myles Turner is somebody who can definitely help to that equation.
So there's a couple things for me. Myles took 394 threes last year with the Pacers. That would have ranked third in 3-point attempts for the Bucks a year ago. Brook Lopez was third with 373 3-point attempts. The big thing is the Bucks leader in 3-pointers made and taken a year ago was Damian Lillard. So that's going to change. Gary Trent Jr. was second at 180 makes, 433 attempts. I mean, very quietly, Gary Trent Jr. was a 42% three-point shooter last year after a horrendous start to the season.
Yeah.
That is something does not get mentioned near enough. Oh, by the way, this guy shot 41% on threes, 42 if we round up last year. I would imagine that number for Gary Trent Jr., if he took 433 last year, I think you'd like that to creep closer to 500. AJ Green was 363. That's going to be over 400. And that should be Gary Trent Jr. numbers, like neck and neck for three-point attempts. And same story for Myles Turner. I would assume he's going to be over 400 three-point attempts. The big thing for me, though, which we have not discussed, and the fit of Myles Turner, the ideal pairing between he and Giannis, the three-point shooting, again, the numbers and how the efficiency has been better than Brook the past couple of years. The volume has been higher too. The one thing that we do have to keep an eye on, and it's where the rest of the moves the Bucks made this offseason are very important to retain that front court, is, Camille, you could pencil in Brook Lopez for basically every single game, save for that 1 year when he had back surgery and missed 2/3 of the season. Other than that, in Milwaukee, 81 games, 68 out of 73, 70 out of 72. The back surgery season where he just played 13, then 78, 79, 80.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same story for Myles Turner. Played 72 games last year. He played 77 the year prior to that. That was the most he had played in an individual season since his second year in the league. 62, 42, 47, 62, 74. So it's not to say he's injury prone, but I do think we have taken for granted Brook Lopez's ability, his availability, and how much of an Iron Man he was. And you at least have other options. You retained Bobby Portis. You brought back Jericho Sims. But it's not going to be like in years past where you knew, well, our starting center is going to be there 82 games a year.
Yeah, which was crazy to think about Brook being that reliable health-wise given his age.
And back surgery.
A 7-footer getting back surgery, and he came back like he never left the lineup to begin with. That's one thing I've been saying about this Clippers team this upcoming year, where it's like there's a lot of question marks with that age of that group and the guys they're relying on there. I was like, at least I would say this, like Brook Lopez, he is 37 years old, but he has not missed many games there. So like the health concerns with that team being older and Brook Lopez, he was the one of the old guys where I'm like, I think he's actually going to be able to play, especially as a backup. So that's a piece of the Brook Lopez game that I do think is underrated, like you mentioned. And Myles Turner is going to walk into a situation here in Milwaukee where, whether right or wrong, he's going to be compared to Brook Lopez going forward, because that has been the defensive archetype that the Bucks are looking for their centers. And also Brook Lopez was the anchor for this era of Bucks basketball defensively, since Giannis MVP-ness really started. So like there's always going to be comparisons, I think, between the two players and just how they played. So for Myles Turner, he's just going to have to be Myles Turner and figure out what that looks like. But for the Bucks, again, we feel good about their front court rotation. We like that they were able to retain Bobby Portis. We like that they brought Jericho Sims back. We enjoy all this. And if Kuz is a 4, what does that mean? If Myles Turner is out, do you see, the Kuz Giannis lineups in the front court a little bit more because you're trying to spread those minutes out? Like, how can the Bucks pivot if injury does strike to Myles Turner or someone else in their front court? And they have some pieces that can gobble up the minutes, but like the ideal form of the Bucks is going to have Myles Turner at center because of the way he can space the floor and play the defense.
Yeah, and again, that's why I think it was important to bring in everything that you did. And even, we joked about it, but the Summer League recap, even to say, well, there are some nice things we saw from Pete Nance. Like, he might be counted on or asked to pitch in for 5, 7 to 10 games next year for that reason. So it would be a much different conversation if this was like years past where your front court was just Giannis, Bobby Portis, and in this case, Myles Turner. Then you're like, this gets a little thin if something happens here. So you do at least have more options. But that was, in looking at the numbers, that was the first thing that jumped out to me. We're going to drift to 3-point shooting and say, hey, this is going to increase and this is a perfect fit. But then you just keep going back to the games played and say, okay, there's going to be a gap out there. I don't anticipate Myles Turner playing 82 games or 78 games. Maybe it's 72 again. Maybe it's mid 70s, right? But that's going to leave a gap of opportunities for somebody else to have to fill in those spots. Couple of interesting names that have been out there. Everybody's favorite site, we see it in the comments, Camille, CBS Sports. It's been at it again with a number of different stories, and one of them about free agents that are left on the market, restricted free agents, and one name that keeps getting attached to the Bucks. We'll get into that conversation and another busy summer for Giannis coming up after this. So I hesitate to bring up the site, but CBS Sports did a story, I believe, yesterday on the remaining free agents. And I think the impetus for this was the reporting that's starting to come out on Jonathan Kuminga now that he's in no rush to take any offer from the Warriors. And he has 2 offers available from the Kings and Phoenix Suns. But you look at the rest of the group of names out there, it's basically restricted free agents on the market. You got Jonathan Kuminga. Not all restricted, but we still haven't seen Al Horford sign. We've been informed Russell Westbrook and Ben Simmons are kind of tied to one another. So we're waiting to see one go someplace, and that could open up some things for the other. Gary Payton II's another one. Our old friend Malcolm Brogdon is another one. But the restricted guys, and Kuminga and Cam Thomas, and a guy that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot, Quentin Grimes. CBS puts together their list of where does this player fit the best. And again, in looking through this, none of this is sourced. It's just, hey, I think this fits.
Right.
But they once again have Cam Thomas with the Bucks. And there was the site, at the risk of it not being FanDuel, I'm not going to name, but there was one of the sites listed the odds for where players would end up. And Cam Thomas was, the Bucks were number 1 or number 2 for a while. We've seen other teams kick around, or Kevin O'Connor, I believe, was one, and other names say, hey, the Bucks should go after Cam Thomas. Well, again, they can only offer a veteran minimum contract. And I get the perceived need for who is your number 2 scorer. I don't see Cam Thomas taking the veteran minimum number 1. I don't see the Nets letting him go for that and not matching that figure. Sign and trades makes it complicated. The Bucks aren't really hampered by any of the apron restrictions, but what are you giving back to take in that salary in a sign and trade is what makes it tough. Because I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Nets are probably not interested in Kyle Kuzma going to the Nets in a sign and trade for Cam Thomas. And that 2031 first round pick, I don't think Cam Thomas is the guy that I would attach it to. So do you have any thoughts on where Cam Thomas ultimately ends up? And do you actually think he would be a good fit in Milwaukee?
Ultimately, I think he ends up staying in Brooklyn, but I think it might be just like the qualifying, I'm just going to be there for the year. Like I'm just going to
be there for the year so I can be unrestricted.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm going to bet on myself. I think we might start seeing that even more often with restricted free agency, just how things are really starting to shake out. But I think that's where he ends up being, because as you mentioned, like even if the Bucks did put out an offer, all they can offer off, like just purely off the rip, is the vet man. And why wouldn't Brooklyn match that? And why would Cam Thomas take that? Like that's part of the delay. Like he wants to get paid some bigger dollars, and taking the vet man is not going to be on the table. So then your only avenue, as you mentioned, is sign and trade. And I don't think the Bucks have the right assets to line that one up. So I think this season Cam Thomas is back with the Nets, but I understand why he keeps getting like mocked to the Bucks, because when you lose a Damian Lillard, someone who was giving you 25 points a night next to as a number 2 option, like some teams that's a number 1 option, but your number 2 was giving you 25 points a night. You're like, well, where's the secondary scoring going to come from on this team? And we've talked a lot about the committee approach that we might see from the Bucks, and thinking like, well, Kevin Porter Jr. or Gary Trent Jr., like I can see them having a bigger Bobby Portis Jr., like just being able to get the points. But to think about a consistent second option, like Cam Thomas fits those boxes because he is a bucket getter. Some might say too much on the tough shot express for Cam Thomas, but like he is somebody who is going to put the buckets up. So like I understand why he keeps getting mocked to Milwaukee. I just don't see a realistic pathway there this season to do it.
Looking at the remaining free agents and most notable, at least. Again, the Bucks roster is currently full. We've gone over at length how that may change and whether or not that is somebody that shares the last name of a player that wears number 34 or you do something else. But if they were to open up a roster spot, any of these names do you think would be worth it or interest you? Stop me when I name one that interests you.
Okay.
Malcolm Brogdon, Gary Payton II, Trey Lyles, Chris Boucher,
nope.
Monte Morris,
nope.
Ben Simmons,
absolutely not.
Russell Westbrook,
repeat last answer.
Seth Curry,
no.
Precious Achiuwa,
no.
Thomas Bryant,
no.
Landry Shamet,
nope.
Corey Joseph,
nope.
Maybe you want. Could I reinterest you in a DeLon Wright campaign or Torrey Craig reunion?
No, thank you.
Taylor Horton Tucker.
Nope.
Alec Burks.
No.
If you loved the names like Ben Simmons and company, could I interest you in Markelle Fultz?
No. Nope.
Cody Martin.
No.
Me? Okay. And then did I say Chris Boucher?
You did. That's still a no.
All right. There's one name left that I saved this for last because I think I know what you might say. Amir Coffey.
Yes. Yes. Because again, a bigger wing type of player, younger guy, still up with 26, 27, I think. Yep. Somewhere in that
27 or 28, yeah.
Yeah. So like, yeah, sure. Like that's a flyer I would take.
Yeah. Below 30, a bigger wing, to your point. Had some nice moments with the Clippers last year, especially. And was a 42% catch and shoot on threes guy. So that makes all right. One last one. Malik Beasley.
Oh no, we can't. No. He got some things to sort out.
Yeah, I mean, looking over the list of guys, I mean, certainly for everything that we just said about their big situation, I mean, all right, if you wanted a break in case of emergency guy, maybe a Trey Lyles type. I would assume Al Horford still ends up in Golden State with the Warriors, but the fact that it keeps going on this long, I mean, I take that as they're just currently looking for, okay, how can we keep Jonathan Kuminga? So what's it going to cost? And how do we say, Al, can we give you this portion of the mid-level that we have so we have X amount left and we can use that to retain Jonathan Kuminga? But it is notable that it's still stretching into August at this point, pretty much. Like we're approaching Brook Lopez signing with the Bucks the first time territory for Al Horford. But yeah, for that list too, for me, it was pretty much, you know what? I'd be interested in Amir Coffey as the 15th man on this roster for the biggest reason being that's the biggest blind spot this roster has right now, the guy that fits that position. The other notable thing was, so before we get to EuroBasket, another story by CBS was, reunions we'd like to see in light of Damian Lillard going back to Portland. Chris Paul goes back to the Clippers. And look, I know he's not currently on the market, but the fact that Chris Middleton and the Milwaukee Bucks were not one of those. Look, I get it. It also happened 6 months ago. Man, but that would be number one with a bullet for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and again, he doesn't really fit everything that we've talked about of what the Bucks need going forward. But he fits a secondary scorer. I mean that part, but like again, buyout is different than trading for and assuming the contract. Like when we had the Drew Holiday conversation, where it's like no, I wouldn't trade for him, but if he happened to be bought out, I would think about it. Chris, I love him down. Like, I love Chris Middleton. It doesn't look right with him in a Wizards jersey at all, but
And wearing number 32, like
32,
what are we doing
none of it
here?
looks right. And as much as I love Chris Middleton again, like I don't know if that would make sense unless he is coming in and he's like, you know what? I am cool with being this bench dude who, you know what I mean? Like the role for him would be so
Yeah, I
different
don't
than what we're used to.
yeah. I mean, it's a different conversation with starting lineup that in terms of pace is not Dame, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, but it's still on the surface doesn't fit how you've assembled
Yeah,
this roster. So it would have to be a bench role. Um, and quite frankly, I think that's a role he would thrive in with any team, but it's also a tough sell to a player of his stature that maybe hasn't fully, I don't know, I don't even want to think or try to get in his head, but maybe hasn't fully come to grips with because of the injuries. This is where my career is. But yes, number one, I think for every single Bucks fan, I hope he gets to finish his career here, even if it's a ceremonial one
yeah,
day contract to retire. I hope Chris moves back here and lives in Brookfield where he was before and just we see you bump into Chris Middleton at Sendix and out and about. You see him on the golf course, and that's the way that Chris Middleton ages into retirement. We also got EuroBasket coming up this summer, and Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to be playing for Greece once again, which always seems to. I don't know. I feel like it's died down a little recently, Camille, but it used to be pretty polarizing of like, I don't want Giannis playing in EuroBasket. I don't want any risk of injury. And then the rest of us, like, especially the last 2 years, when you'd look at it and say, last summer, especially, hey, this is our first chance to see Giannis since the soleus strain.
yeah. And I get it. I never want to tell somebody how to fan. So I'm not going to be like, if you disagree with me and how I view it, like you are wrong. But this is important to Giannis. It is very important to him to play for his country. And internationally, these tournaments, international play is looked at so differently than how Americans tend to view EuroBasket and the Olympics and everything like that. I think in part because as Americans, like basketball's our sport. Like it's a sport invented in North America here. Like it's something that has been uniquely American. And as the world continues to fall in love with the game, like this means something to them. And for Giannis to play for his country, like I'm always going to be here for it because I know it means that much for him. Like seeing them, last summer getting into the Olympics and just the emotion that overcame Giannis and everything with that. Like, I love that for him. Like, you can get injured doing anything, anytime, anywhere. And like you can't play scared. Like you can't play in the bubble of like, well, we're just gonna shut him down forever because you might get hurt that way of not being able to ramp yourself up. Like going into EuroBasket, which is the end of August, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, going into September, like he'll be done before Bucks training camp, and then you get the training camp and you can roll right on into it.
August 27th to September 14th. So it's going to basically butt up against training camp starting, but that's Giannis's offseason 5-on-5 pretty
Yeah.
much is going through that. And we don't have a decision yet for Nikola Jokic. Luka Doncic said back in December that he intended to play for Slovenia. Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert are not playing for France. So the big names out there right now that you can look forward to seeing, the Bosnian beast, Yusuf Nurkic playing for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Zachary Rissache and Gerson Yabusele, probably the biggest names that are going to be playing for France, and noted Bucks killer Moussa Diabate. You got Dennis Schroeder and Franz Wagner playing for Germany. Giannis, the only notable name NBA-wise on Team Greece. Denny Avdia is playing for Israel. Dante DiVincenzo playing for Italy, along with Simone Fontecchio, who's now with the Heat and was once the apple of my eye, and a player I wish the Bucks would have targeted. Nikola Vucevic on Montenegro, Jonas Valanciunas playing for Lithuania, now with the Denver Nuggets. No questions
Officially.
about that. And Santi Aldama playing for Spain. That's really the gist of the big names out there. So it's not like I'm old enough to remember in the 90s when you would occasionally have some international rosters included on like NBA 2K
Yeah.
or NBA Live, and you'd say, oh, wow, that's where that guy went. Like now you pretty much know a lot of the guys on these rosters, and we get that to look forward to for 3 weeks to see Giannis and Team Greece playing in EuroBasket. Last thing to throw out there as we start to wrap this up, Camille, how excited are you for the return of the NBA to NBC this fall?
Ooh, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. Like they're assembling a pretty good like studio team. The broadcast teams are looking really nice. I keep hearing the music in my head. I've been rewatching a lot of just random older games. So like I was just watching the 93 finals. And like when it starts and you hearing the music, and you're just like,
I can't take it. Charles Barkley is, I mean, the current number 34 is going to have a say, but Charles Barkley is my all-time favorite athlete. And that 93 finals ruined my summer as an 11-year-old. It was over from there. And seeing John Paxson hit that above the break three to wrap up the series, I never fully recovered from that.
Still hurt when you hear 93 finals, you just go, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been quite a list. And you look at, they even added, I think, 5 more yesterday in their press release and announcement. You look at it and you're like, so why does ESPN seemingly just have like 6 guys that we're cycling through? Like, why can't we get the same? Michael Grady, who used to be the sideline reporter for the Brooklyn Nets, has been the radio play-by-play guy for the Timberwolves for the past couple of years. Michael Grady will be on play-by-play. Mike Tirico's number 1 in their play-by-play guys. Noah Eagle, Terry Gannon, that's their play-by-play group. They already announced Jamal Crawford, Reggie Miller, and Grant Hill as analysts. And then yesterday, they announced Derek Fisher, Brad Doherty, Robbie Hummel, Brian Scalabrine, and Austin Rivers as one of their analysts. And that joins names like Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter. Yes, those 2. I was going to say somebody else, but I believe that's Amazon. And then Maria Taylor is their studio host. We'll see Michael Jordan as a special contributor as well. So it's a big list of names here. And I think the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is not only the return of Round Ball Rock and just the nostalgia of seeing the NBA on NBC. Hopefully they use the same graphics packages and do the intros that you were alluding to as well, where they're actually telling a story. But I think the biggest thing is just change. Like it felt like we've had the conversation many times. This was a league in how the TV presentation has been just needs a change and needs to be shaken up a little bit. So to see NBC and Amazon get in, and I would assume do that, is probably something long overdue.
So long overdue. Like there's not much more to say that. Like make the games feel special, make them feel like events. And NBC is a company that historically has always made you feel that way when you're tuning into those games. Like even back in the day, like when ABC games would come on, it was like, oh, this feels different than a normal NBA game. So just adding some of that back into it. And I think the NBA heard a lot of the complaints this year about presentation, especially once they got to the finals, of just how regular everything felt. So they have to put a little bit more into that. And I think NBC is going to be a nice step in the right direction.
Yeah. And this fall, we'll get a chance to see that. The NBA returning to NBC. That'll do it for today's show. So starting next week, we're not saying there's only going to be 3, but you may see less shows on a weekly basis as we finally moved through the busy parts of the offseason and now into a bit of a dead spot for about a month or so in the offseason. So the frequency of the show may be a little lighter than you've seen. We'll still do at least 3 shows a week. And again, you'll still get some weeks where there's a show every day, especially when the news warrants, but just more of an FYI. That'll do it for today and for the week. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.